We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you. So we had a full house earlier, and we may have some people still out in the lobby, but if you were standing earlier and you're still here, thank you. If you see an empty seat, please feel free to take it, and hopefully I won't make anyone mad. What I failed to say in the intro were the three things that our project hoped to achieve, which was to put a face on homelessness, because oftentimes things that we are unfamiliar with, we avoid and we fear. And then it was also to highlight the services that are available in the community, and then also to inform our viewers on ways that they can help. So hopefully we were able to accomplish that. I want to introduce our panel that we have for this evening and express our appreciation for their willingness to be here and for you to have a chance to ask them questions. So I'm going to ask that our panel introduce themselves and kind of their lens that they're looking at homelessness through.
Tamra Losinski, I'm the Executive Director of Family Promise of Greater Modesto, and I know you saw a little bit about the program, but our goal in Modesto is to alleviate the consequences of homelessness for children and their families. So we shelter families with children. We also work to help them find permanent housing, and new to us this past year, we have a homeless prevention program that is designed to help meet the needs of families that are at risk of homelessness, and hopefully we'll be able to prevent that.
Hi, I'm Brad Hawn. I'm a local structural engineer, and what I do beyond that is work in neighborhoods in Modesto. I'm the president of Modesto Neighborhoods, which is trying to get the neighborhoods to come together to help with all sorts of things. And also I'm one of the co-chairs of the Focus on Prevention you heard a lot about on the film, and there's a lot of really good stuff that's happening. There's been a lot of groundwork that's been done over the last years, and there's not much to show for it, and I can understand that, but we're on the cusp of some really exciting things that hopefully we'll talk about tonight. That some of the things, the low barrier shelter is hopefully right around the corner. So that's me.
I'm Kristi Ah You. I am just a Modesto resident, lived here since 1971. I have a funeral home by the name of Franklin and Downs, and I'm also your City Council member, District 3.
I'm Galen. I'm your police chief, and at the police department, I guess we're the ones that harass everybody. Not really our intention. But I will tell you, from the police perspective, it's a very frustrating position to be in, because we mainly are squeezing a water balloon, and we squeeze it this way and it comes out the other side and pops up other places, and we end up bouncing around the city responding to complaints, and the different parks responding to complaints and things like that. So there's a lot of talk about focus on prevention and care and things like that, and that's kind of been in the works for about a year or so, but the actual work of it is slowly rolling out, and I'm really hoping that that provides that resource, that when we go in and talk to people, we can say we need someone to come out now, because now's when they're willing to get help or to participate in some of the programs. So I'll stop with that.
Hi, I'm David Fuller. I'm the local homeless person. I've lived in the community most of my adult life. Currently, I am homeless. I'm the one on the ground getting to see all these programs starting to develop and hoping that they do.
Thank you. I just have one general question for the panel. Anybody can take a stab at it, and because I want to leave room for the audience. I know that you probably have burning questions yourselves, but so our project started about 5 years ago, and so it started before Focus on Prevention and the care effort, and even conversations around low barrier shelter. And so for that reason, we felt very fortunate that we were able to see kind of these things happen during the duration of our capturing what's going on in the community. So if we were to project 5 years from now with all of that in place, where is the issue of homelessness in your opinion, and kind of from your vantage point in the different capacities that you fulfill?
Well, there's a lot of ground that work that's been laid, like I mentioned, and we are really on the cusp of some really exciting things relate to homelessness and actually helping people. That's what I think we have to change our vocabulary a bit, because if you're a homeless person, that's kind of, if you call a person homeless, that kind of is a degrading term. But what we are on the cusp of is low barrier shelter. We had 2 tries at it, and for different reasons we were unable to do, but we have another one that's going to be rolling out and hopefully open by the end of the year, which will house low barriers, pets, partners, and possessions. And frankly, it gives the police an opportunity and the care team someplace to go, because as a neighborhood person, it's really frustrating to ask a policeman to, will you take care of this problem, but there's no place for the policeman to take folks to get help. And so that's what this low barrier shelter is about. And there's other things that are happening, but that is probably the biggest thing that we hopefully will begin to see a difference in our community. And it's not just getting people out of the parks and off the streets. It's getting help for people so they can get back on their feet. And that's what this is all about.
So I will just say real quick, focus on prevention is not a magic bullet. 5 years from now, quite frankly, there will still be homelessness on our streets. Hopefully it won't be to the point that it is right now. Hopefully we'll be much more agile at helping people and taking care of them. The frustrating thing over the last 5 years that I have seen is if we were a sled dog team, we would all be pulling in different directions. There's lots of people doing lots of good things, but not really communicating with each other. And so hopefully focus on prevention will bring everybody together and we actually start pulling all in the same direction to make that impact. So I just want to make sure that we don't fool ourselves to think we're going to solve the problem completely, but just make a major impact.
And I think that everyone is here tonight is a great step in the right direction. And Family Promise, we want to thank Richard Anderson and the Peace Life Center for hosting us here tonight. And we appreciate that so much. And we have made progress since the information that was put in the video. There have been other organizations that are now sheltering families together. The Gospel Mission has some rooms now that they're doing that, but there's still not enough. And so what we want to see is more of this, is more of the community showing up and everybody realizing that they can do something. And even though the problem of homelessness might be overwhelming, if we all do something, it can be better in 5 years.
From our point of view, these programs are great, and they're going to be helping people. We as homeless, as a group, we get frustrated because of the numbers. You know, I know 40 helps here, 20 helps here, but we want to see 100 helped, you know, or 200. I know it's unreasonable, but that's something that we look at. And we're going to have homelessness, I think, forever. To what degree? Who knows?
That's a great point. I think the last point in time count, which is done annually or every 2 years, had about 1,200, approximately 1,200, and that number may be underreported because of how the strategies to doing that. So thank you for sharing those reflections. We do have mic runners in the audience, so if you have a question, we ask that you come to the end of the aisle so that our mic runner can get to you. So we will take a question from the audience, and then if you can, because we're recording, if you can ensure that you're speaking into the mic and also address who the question is going towards.
Leng, may I say something? I'm right here. Oh. So I did a lot of research before I ran for office. I'm still not clear how that's benefiting anybody that I ran for office, but I'm trying my best. I would like to say that my opinion is we have a mental health crisis. We also have a drug addiction crisis. We also have an issue with people who have lived being incarcerated their entire lives, coming out and not being able to cope. And we have people who are veterans who are suffering. So when we think about who it is that we are calling these people or those people, those are our people. There is no hard and fast solution to this issue. This is something that affects everyone, including myself. My daughter is a single mother with 2 children, and she could not find a place to live. Thankfully, she has family. If you don't have family and you don't have resources, you are absolutely screwed. So, but I just want to tell you that everyone here, and most every one of you, wants to find a solution. We're all trying so hard to do that. Brad has spent countless hours and a lot of his own personal finances and energy and prayers to find a solution. But the problem is when your city or county government choose to do that, we are also taking on a liability, and that is a liability that you will ultimately pay. So these decisions are hard, but we all want to find a solution, absolutely. And I'm going to be quiet now.
Yes, my name is Tommy Carson, and I'm highly involved with the mental health aspect. I have a mental illness. I was homeless 3 years ago. I'm wondering about Laura's Law and how, because I see a lot of people out there myself on a daily basis that are they're beyond comprehension. So I mean, they don't understand. They need help. And how soon is implementation of Laura's Law going to be, start happening?
I have a little bit of information about that. Laura's Law and AOT is simply a tool in the toolbox. It's something that's going to help some of the people some of the time. We do have something coming up. It's an assembly bill. It's actually on the floor right now. It's number 1971. That under Section 5150, you can bring people into your care for being gravely disabled. As you know, we have many people on the streets of Modesto that we see, that we clearly understand that they need help beyond our ability as a community. And so that's something that's being looked at. And then I was just going to see if you have anything other than that. So if you're brought in for 5150, we can hold you for 3 days. Beyond that, it's called a 5250. It's 14 days that we can hold someone to have them evaluated. But beyond that, there are serious laws regarding people and their ability to be free.
Okay, next audience question, unless anyone else wanted to. Okay, great.
Hi, my name's Regan Wilson, and I know a little bit about some of these problems from my past experiences. The question I have for you is, what is your single biggest barrier for getting these things moving along, and so people are working along the same direction, and as the chief said, not going in different directions? And how do you find a leadership in our community to help make that happen?
So since I threw that out there, I'll try to answer. Couple things with the biggest barrier. That you have different departments within the county, within the city. They all have their own mission. And in the past, if we called an outreach worker, the response would be, well, you can have them come in next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and that doesn't really help me out when today's Wednesday. And so it's getting the outreach workers out with our officers and others. We do have a lot of volunteers. I think Frank's around the back there somewhere, but I can't see through the bright lights. Frank is actually an example of a guy whose passion is probably beyond match when it comes to homeless and trying to help people out. The CARE team, and part of that leadership, there's a CARE initiative that is rolling out, and it's slowly getting there. And that is because the leadership from Modesto and the county and all the county departments are meeting, and they have been meeting, I believe it's bi-weekly for the last several months. And I realize that that's frustrating because you're like, hey, all you're doing is meeting. I will tell you as the chief in a fairly large organization, the decisions I make today, lots of times I won't see the results for a year. So the first step was getting everybody actually in the room and start talking about, there's HIPAA laws where we can't talk about someone's mental health stuff. We can't talk about their diagnosis between police and the behavioral health. And there's just a lot of things that shouldn't be barriers that are, quite frankly, barriers. And so that CARE initiative and that CARE team that has been meeting, that is, you should in the next 6 months to 8 months start to see a result of all that working together. And it has taken a long time to break down those barriers. And there are still some barriers that need to be broken down, but it is very slow. It's definitely at the speed of bureaucracy, and we need it to be much faster than that.
Really, I've lived in Modesto my whole life, and I think much of the barrier, while you can guess government, laws and all those things, I think it's the will to do the right thing. I've seen our community come up to the spot of doing the right thing and then always backing off away from that because of some pressure. The low barrier shelter is a good example. This is our third try at trying to make this happen. And there's what we need from you is to show up at the Board of Supervisors meeting on August 21st when it's going to be actually brought before the Board of Supervisors. Probably going to be declaring an emergency in order to be able to fast track some of these things. But honestly, it's the will to continue on with this. And my wife calls me stubborn, but I like to say I'm tenacious because I've quit 25 times, but within 20 minutes I'm back because we really have to solve this problem. It's about our community, and it's about people that we're not serving. And the issue of that you talked about, mental health, we had a meeting yesterday about the future long-term low barrier shelter in the whole county, and we had everybody there from government that is going to be a part of it. And I was shocked at the single-mindedness to get this thing done. And we came to great conclusion. I've never seen that before. So, Reagan, I think it's coming together, and I think we're going to see some real action because this is not a government problem. It's not a public problem. It's all of our problem. We all have to solve it together.
I think we have to remember that the greatest barrier when it comes for those of us that are actually taking people and sheltering them and helping them now is affordable housing. I checked today, and at the end of June, according to the statistics that are online, the two-bedroom average rent in Modesto was $1,343. We operate a program with HUD funding that will allow us to pay up to $1,035 for a two-bedroom unit. So even with the housing assistance that we have, we are struggling to find units that are affordable for the families that we serve. And then even with that, then comes that it has to pass an inspection, and many of the units that fall below that amount won't pass the inspection, and then the owners just kind of give up. So I think it really does take all of us. It's going to take the owners making the effort to take a chance, maybe to accept a little bit lower of a rent, and those are the kinds of things that we're advocating for families every day. But that affordable housing piece, if we don't address that as a community, even the existing programs aren't going to work.
With the affordable housing in focus, there needs to be obviously a lot more of it. I'm looking forward to my 62nd birthday. I'm going to take early retirement. I haven't done anything in years, but I'm going to retire. But when I'm calling around and looking into affordable housing, the subsidized senior places, I'm still looking at 10 months to 3 years on a waiting list after I get Social Security. So, you know, it does take time, and it's taking longer than I want, but I have to deal with it.
To the point of affordable housing, there was a recent San Francisco Chronicle article saying that the intuitive wisdom of resolving homelessness is actually houses, and I don't think anyone would deny that. So if we're talking about coordination of public will and political will, where, and I see, Kristi, you have the microphone very appropriately, where does that fall? How can we make that happen?
That is not something that's going to happen easily. It's a very difficult, there's just so many avenues and things that are involved with affordable housing. I mean, we have a project, it's the Archway Commons, the second phase, and you have to find a builder that wants to do it. You have to find the financing to do it. We have some financing available, but who wants to build affordable housing? No one's going to make any money with affordable housing, right? I mean, I hate to just say it like it is, but that's how it is. And if you're a landlord and you have 800 people applying for your $1,500 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, are you going to take someone with an eviction or with disabilities or issues? I mean, it's a big problem. And honestly, I think the government needs to be involved. And I'm saying this as a Republican.
Well, I'm not sure what I am anymore as far as, but I think we're going to have to do things differently. I think relying on government and HUD to solve our housing problem when it's like $300,000 a unit is just not going to happen. And part of the CSOC, which is the continuum of care for homelessness, is we're working on building that up so that we have a housing element that's got the type of people that can make it happen. I personally think, this is my own personal view, is that if you offer a landlord a guaranteed rent, programming and assistance, so that all I do is collect my market rate rent, it's way cheaper than doing it the HUD way. And I think you'll have private developers building places because they can get market rent. And whether then it becomes our responsibility on this side to keep them full, to keep the folks in there responsible and in programs and things, helping their lives get better and getting them to the spot where they're going to be good tenants. So I think we have to partner with the private sector the way the private sector can partner with us, but it puts the responsibility back on the community and government also to provide that backstop for them. And I think we'll have a lot of housing that way.
Right. That's a refreshing thing to hear you both say. We'll take a question from the audience now. A mic runner, we have some over here. Oh, yes, you have
Good
a
evening. I'm Tim Ragsdale, and I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come up here tonight. And it was a great documentary. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And just for a little background, as with that photographer that was cleaning up his place, I've been on the poop detail about the last 3 weeks, but fortunately the City Council, and thank you very much, cut down or pruned some trees, which were providing cover for these folks, and they're no longer fouling my property. But Chief, I wanted to speak to the point you made about all of us working together and pulling in the same direction and making sure we're not, working against each other. What I haven't seen and haven't been able to find is a quantification of all the impacts of this on our community. And I'm just going to mention a few to give you an idea of what I'm thinking about. What is the impact on the people that have shopping carts, the stores, the retailers? What is the impact on the police department? How can we quantify that? How about the parks department? What are we spending there? The reason that's important to me as an accountant and a businessman is that when I see the numbers, I know maybe it gives me a clue of where to put my emphasis, and I have a way to measure my successes.
So I actually agree with you as far as the quantification, but that even goes back to how do you quantify crime rates? we do have, and this is probably going to sound the mean side, so that's why I say I guess can be the bad guy. But here's the thing: we do have a lot of mental illness. We have a lot of drug abuse. We see the same people as the police department. There are a lot of individuals that I don't really see that much, but that doesn't mean they're any less homeless. We spend a lot of time dealing with the same people over and over and over and over again. They clog the emergency rooms. They clog the jails. They clog our call screens. They mess your property. And quite frankly, this is where it's gonna sound mean. Affordable housing is not gonna do them any good whatsoever, because San Francisco tried a program where they bought an apartment building and they were just putting people in without the services and without the follow-up, and they still acted homeless, and they were dragging a bunch of junk and stuff into their apartments. So it's more that holistic approach. But I don't think it would be that hard to quantify. Quite honestly, we've already done that at the police department, just looking at the top 150. That's how they were chosen. And I wish I had the stats off the top of my mind, but it's mind-blowing how much time the police department spends on those 150 people. And you can multiply that by how many times they're going to DMC and using AMR and using those other things. And I guarantee we're spending millions of dollars on that very small population. And I think that would probably be a low estimate.
On that note, I did want to say, going back to the CARE initiative, which is the CARE program report, you can get it online at modesto.gov. I did want to tell you that we located 143 individuals that were using probably, I'm just going to throw this out there, 70% of the services most of the time. One of those persons had been 5150'd about 75 times. So these folks we now know who they are, and we can now identify how it is that we could possibly help them.
I just wanted to mention one little thing before we move on, but because I think as we really do want to focus on prevention, and even when we talk about the people that are using the majority of the services, one of the things that we did at Family Promise in response to focus on prevention and looking at root causes was we started to ask a few more questions of the people that we were serving, and we found that we thought it would be high. We knew adults in our program would have had experienced adverse childhood trauma, and we found that we were expecting about half, and we found that about 90% plus of the adults that come to our program have had some kind of childhood trauma. So services do matter, and we have to wrap around those services, but I also think if we start to not, even though homeless children may not be a population that is giving us trouble right now, that we need to invest in making sure families with children are safe so that we can prevent homelessness for the future.
Excellent point. It's about prevention. We have a question over here, and then we'll make sure to get the mic over.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Perry. I happen to be the president of the Modesto Band of Stanislaus County. I appreciate the cleaning up of Beard Brook Park. That was one of my favorite parks as a child. However, the ramification of that is that we've displaced all of these people, and we are starting to lose Grace Ada Park. And I'm going to tell you that, quite frankly, this year is the biggest invasion of homeless in Grace Ada Park that we've ever had. I understand that the police chief's hands are tied, but in some way, shape, and form, we have to assume losses. Beard Brook is an easy thing to give up at this point. Everything has been moved out from there. There is no attraction. There used to be a healthy softball league that went on there. It is gone. The other thing I would like to say that I'm so happy that all of you are here to speak to this matter. I think it's also telling that there's not a single staff member from the city of Modesto here. Thank you.
So they weren't invited, just so you know. But I will say this. So when it comes to Grace Ada Park, it ebbs and flows, and you see it all the time. Brad sees it all the time. I'm not going to dime him off, but I know he's close to Grace Ada Park. Here's part of the situation. This is part of the working together, and it was even in the movie, and I will tell you, I was actually happy with the documentary, because I was kind of worried which way it would go. But this is part of the working together. very, very well-meaning groups, and I mean they mean well. They keep coming back, and they'll feed in the park. And when you have individuals who have mental illness, you have individuals who they know where to go get food, and they'll stay there. And now they stay in the park waiting for that food to come back. And you just keep delivering it, but you're not coming out with any services. So I spend a ton of police resources on Griseta Park and on a lot of the parks. It may not seem like it, but it's like sweeping water in a flood. You sweep the water and it comes right back. And that's why the police department gets so frustrated. And that's why I'm hoping this helps, but I also know there's a lot of frustration as well.
So since we're fighting over the microphone, no one likes my idea, but I don't know why we can't just like let people camp at Beard Brook. Sorry, no, you can't have it yet. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but there's a little bit of dignity in being able to stay someplace and being able to not be shuffled off. I don't think that's the solution at all, but I do think that a place to use the restroom and take a shower and maybe even pay like $5 to camp there that night and have a case manager or a social worker on site. No one likes my idea, I understand, but just until we can figure something out, that's what I think would be nice. And yeah.
Sorry, Kristi. I don't dislike your idea. As the police chief, here's the biggest concern with the idea. It's great to say, go forth and take over Beard Brook Park. That happened in Fresno. That happened in several other cities. You ended up having prostitution, drug dealing, gang members. The homeless themselves were being victimized by people that were coming into those homeless camps. And so unless you provide safety, security, and services, you are basically just making the Wild West of Beard Brook Park. So that is why every time that comes up of why don't you just let them camp down there, I'm trying to prevent that until we get something where there is some semblance of order, I guess, if that makes sense.
One more thing.
Okay. Sounds like a lot of energy around that item. Did you want to address it?
One more thing. In the meantime, though, all of our businesses and our houses and our people that are paying taxes and just trying to mind their own business are cleaning up, defecation and trash and dealing with hypodermic needles. So somewhere in the middle of he and I is the solution, I guess.
Well,
Brad wants to weigh in. Which
yeah,
side?
I've been waiting patiently for your show.
We're done.
By December, if the votes go correctly on the 21st, we'll have 60 to 100 new beds in Modesto that are program-based. They're not just warehousing people. It's about coming in and changing that they can bring their dogs and their possessions and their partners. In addition to that, within a year to maybe 2 years, that'll probably be tripled by working with the different cities in the community to try and disperse. And for instance, in Patterson's a great example. They have a host house which has 15 beds. I went out there the other day. They don't have anything for women. We're working on a women's shelter that will be another 15 beds. And we're coming up with a module, basically a prototype or a franchise, if you want to put it that way, where we can go to each city and they can have the help with this low barrier shelter that'll house people instead of them being out on their own.
Well, now David.
It's a great idea, but when you have people in Patterson or Oakdale or Riverbank getting transportation into town to take care of business or some of these resources that we need, a lot of us can't afford it. It's $2. It may not sound a lot to you guys, but it's quite a bit to us out there.
Sounds like there's a lot to consider, even with really good ideas. Someone has been waiting really patiently, so we'll go ahead and take a question from the audience.
Here. What about up here?
Certainly enjoyed the movie that you provided and the information that it provided. But I think what my question is tonight is I would like to know who is the point of contact for people who might have resources to offer? Who do you contact? All of the agencies and the number of people involved in this task force that you've set up, but how do you contact them, and who would they be?
This sounds like an access center.
It's the access center that's open currently behind the jail.
Yes, I know that.
That's the place to go. And what's really happening is the synergy is happening because all the different folks that have the different
so do you have
programs.
someone in charge that you should contact?
Yes.
That you could give the name out tonight?
I don't have the number, but I can give it to the group and they can email it out to everybody.
We have a Facebook page. It's Modesto Homeless Documentary, and we can certainly share that information on there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Was there a question up in the balcony? Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. First of all, thank you for everybody involved here for hosting this. I think it's a very positive step in the right direction. And I suspect that everybody in the audience that's here tonight is interested in trying to help solve this issue as well. And I've heard several comments from the dais up there about this being our problem, not just the city's problem or the county's problem or any of the faith-based organizations' problems. It's the community's problem. And let's face it, it takes financial resources to solve a problem of this magnitude. And I'm sure many people in the audience here, myself included, have donated money to various organizations represented here tonight and continue to do so. If it's truly a community problem, why aren't we talking about implementing a tax so that the community pays for this, not just a handful of individuals and congregations of the faith-based organizations and that sort of thing? I realize that takes political will. Taxes is a dirty word, I understand that. But if we're going to solve this problem as a community, we all need to contribute. And the only way to fairly spread that around the community, in my opinion, is through a tax that is designated and earmarked specifically for this use. And, you know, I know Kristi is representative of the City Council here. I don't see anybody here from the County Board of Supervisors, but it seems to me that a county-wide tax, similar to a library tax, that would generate some revenue to address some of these issues would be a huge step in the right direction and would be a fair way to share this pain with the entire community.
How do we feel about the idea of taxation?
Okay. So, I had an appointment with an unnamed Board of Supervisor, and I said, how much money do we get in this county for mental health? And he wasn't really sure, but he gave me the budget. I said, how do we spend it? And that person wasn't really sure, but I know it's $115 million that we receive, and it's for 455 positions. So if we allocate a tax, that's cool, but we need to make sure that we know exactly how it's going to be spent and where it's going to go. Because if you, I'm going to make everybody mad right now. I'm just terrible at this, but if you just give it to the government and we just like have a bunch of case managers running around and no cot with the person sleeping in it, we got to really think about that.
Actually, that is what's beginning to happen. Jody Hayes, the CEO of the county, is really looking at what are we spending our money on and what are the results. And that's what Focus on Prevention is about real results. It's not how many haircuts did you give, but how many people are really not experiencing homelessness. And so those conversations are coming. As far as a tax, I don't think money's the problem. I think the will to do it is. And here's how we got $2.5 million from the state legislature last year because we started talking about working together. We just got word in the new budget that there's over $7 million coming to Stanislaus County to deal with homelessness because we're starting to work together. So the money, there's a lot of money there. The county spends $750 million a year on social services. And so what we're going to see in the future, I believe, is a redirection of those funds to places that are actually causing results rather than just doing it like we have in the past. But that's going to come. It's not something that's going to happen today.
Okay, we will take another audience question. We have some up here, and then we'll make sure we get the mic over on that side.
Hi, my name is Julie Brigelli, and thank you for what you've done here tonight. I think I was surprised. I called the State Theater to see if I needed to get a ticket early yesterday because I was interested, and they said, oh, I don't think so, just come on down. And so when I drove up tonight, I was thrilled to see that our community is this interested, and I'm so proud to hear we're doing things. But my concern and what I'm addressing right here is the mental ill part of it. I think that we can get people to work that want to work and help them, and I'm listening to your programs. But as far as mental illness goes, what I witnessed as a young girl when they closed the state hospital, a lot of more people in the Bay Area I saw on the street as a little girl, and I thought, wow, there's a lot more crazies out here now. This is as a little girl. And I've seen it grow and grow, and I think for mentally ill people, there needs to be a place where they feel safe and fed and bed, and that's our responsibility as a society to not have mentally ill people on the street. So I'm addressing just that. I think a state hospital was a good thing. I knew my friends' parents were employed there. It provided employment, and it also provided a safe haven for mentally ill people. So kudos to the fellow who was talking about a tax. I would pay for it for mentally ill people to be taken off the streets and be safe.
Thank you for sharing. We have a gentleman up here who's been waiting. So can we get a mic to this gentleman up here?
Yeah, I want to echo what was just said. And I think I want to... my point would be about education of the homeless. I think that a lot of people don't understand who's homeless and why they're homeless. And the video by Richard, was an excellent start in that. So let me make one point about minimum wage. If you look at annual inflation, in 1960, in today's dollars, the minimum wage is about $19 an hour. So we've seen a cut by half in the minimum wage. To the degree to which people are homeless because they don't have the money to afford housing, I would imagine that might have something to do with it. So my question to you, to the panelists, is I want to get a better vertical and horizontal perspective. I want to get a better sense of how did homeless change in Modesto in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, in the first decade and this decade. Secondly, I want to get a clear, that would be a vertical, right, going back to the last 40 years. I'd like to get a better horizontal picture of homelessness. What percentage of the homeless are due to mental illness, due to losing a job, due to drug addiction? I would like to get a clear data picture on the horizontal level and a really clear historical picture, because I just don't accept that homelessness just appeared out of nowhere, all of a sudden it got bad. Or I don't accept that it's just simply individuals getting homeless, and yes, as a community, we address that. But I also think it's really important to step back and look at the big historical picture of how homelessness has varied over the decades. And I don't think it's just like random ups and downs that will always be with us. I actually think it has to do with what's going on historically in California, and that we as a community have the responsibility to speak back to our legislators so that we might enact policies on that. Sorry about the long question.
Our mentally ill and drug addicts were previously held in our state prisons. And through recent legislation, which I'll let the chief explain, these people are not kept in prison any longer. So you can go ahead and talk about those things.
So, and keep in mind, minimum wage is great, but if you have a drug problem and you're mentally ill, I can pay you $100 an hour, but you're not going to go to work. So, not you, buddy. So, I'm ready to retire. Right, exactly. So we've talked about it a lot as far as the police department goes. The state of California, in its wisdom, and this irritates me as an individual. As a police chief, I'm apolitical, but we've talked over and over again about Prop 47 and AB 109, and you have individuals that say, oh, it didn't affect the crime rates whatsoever. Crime actually went down. There was supposed to be root beer from the water fountains and gold on the streets to pay for all the programs, to get people off the drugs, to do all this other stuff. That has not come to pass. And it was really like deciding you're going to build a freeway and saying it's going to that orchard, not cutting down the trees, not paving it, just opening it. And that was really Prop 47 and AB 109. You released over a third of the prison population in 1 year. And then the next couple years, you actually took all the crimes that would send people to prison, made them misdemeanors that could just be cited out. We don't even arrest people for drugs anymore. People who used to go and get arrested for drugs had to go to court and would go to drug court and would at least have to get treatment to get that off their record. That doesn't happen anymore. And so part of the homeless, and you see this huge uptick in homeless, it's not really the right way, but 50% of those individuals were in jail at one time, and it was kind of a rotation. That's crazy for a criminal justice system, but now you've taken that out, and you haven't provided the treatment or the incentives or even the accountability not only for that individual, but for the programs that supposedly help those individuals. Everybody comes with their hand out that I want to be the one that helps. But there's not the accountability that comes back that says, did you really help? And so that's a huge issue. And as far as the mental health and the drug abuse, if you got rid of that, you'd get rid of a lot of our homeless. As far as the mental illness and locking people up in state hospitals, there's this cool thing called the Constitution, and you can't tell a crazy person they're crazy. You'll stand on the corner and argue with them. And so unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at. But.
And we were ordered by the U.S. Supreme Court to reduce the California jail population and prison population, so that's why we had to do that.
So where I'm sitting, what you're saying is there's no silver bullet to this thing. It's very complicated. For every homeless folks, every person, there's a different story of why. And from my perspective, I can't change the laws. I can't do a lot of things, but what I can do is try to get to the core of why a person's homeless and get them in an environment where they can change and grow. That is very high accountable, because I think without that, we're just. I think I see, like, I was in LA on Monday and I was going to take a bunch of pictures of the homeless and I just couldn't. It's just like, it's so depressing and hopeless, because the answer to homelessness generally is housing, but I don't think it is. It's part of it. It's a big part of it. But the answer to homelessness is giving people the chance to change and to become, everybody wants to be productive in their family and give them a chance for that. One thing I hadn't mentioned, it's kind of we're very, very close to working a contract with a company called Downtown Streets Teams, which will employ people who want to be employed. And what I'm finding out is you'd be really surprised at what that spark will do in people's lives. People that you didn't think could actually make a turn. And so that's a standalone. It's getting people on their feet into housing and productive through jobs. It's just that's not for everybody, but it is going to be for a number of people. So I look at it like, let's chip away at what we can and see if there's some results. And if something doesn't work, let's stop doing it and do something else.
Thank you. So we have less than 10 minutes left, and we probably have time for one more audience question. I would like to give the panel then some time to give us some closing remarks. So one last question from the audience. Where's the mic? Okay, right there.
Hi, thank you so much. And the question I have is probably more for the chief, and I apologize, this is going to be directed at you. Just a little background. My husband and I, we've lived in Modesto our entire life, graduated from Downey, graduated from Davis. We've owned businesses in Modesto. We accept HUD vouchers for our rentals. I have the burnt end right over here on 9th Street. Last week, a homeless person, literally threw a can of food at my head, busted my window, and covered me. Took an hour for the cops to show up. I don't mind that. I know you guys are completely overburdened. I completely understand that. So then 2 days later, what happens is I have these murals out there. I hear something through the wall. I wasn't sure what was happening. I go out there. 2 homeless people are fighting. One's trying to steal the other person's food. So instead of calling the cops, I break it up myself, send the guy on his way, and then I bring the lady into my restaurant. As business owners, what are we supposed to do when we've done everything that we know how to do and I'm still getting hit in the head? I'm still having fights outside of my restaurant. I employ the homeless. I have employed mentally ill people. Like I said, we accept HUD vouchers. We've done everything we can, but how as business owners, especially in the downtown area, when I'm right across the street from the bus station, how are we supposed to protect ourselves? And not just protect ourselves. I don't want to say I'm not afraid of the homeless at all. And since certain incidences, I definitely am. I've never had an incident where I've been afraid of them personally besides the can. But every day, it's another incident. Every day, I have to go break up a fight. Every day, not just the poop on my doors that I have to clean up or the locks that I have to put onto my building to keep people out of it. It's just, what do we do now? If we can't call the cops and I have my own personal security, but they're not allowed to do anything. So it's like they can't they try to escort the people off, but we're not allowed to do any of these things. How do we do this?
So I will talk to you offline because you have a ton of questions and a ton of issues. Just real briefly, the way the police department works when it comes to calls for service. I will just tell you this, pretty much 24/7, there's 10 to 15 calls for service holding. They hold all day long, and I'm not saying they hold all day long because we're not going.
Right.
There's just 10 to 15 calls for service holding. They're prioritized, and it depends on what is entered by the dispatcher, what the priority of the call is. We do have a downtown officer now, which is Jessica Harris. The homeless do know her. They have nicknamed her, and they don't like her very much. The ones that need accountability. She does try to direct into the right place, but she is taking care of that. I don't want to say her nickname. Her nickname is the Monster because she will, it's not a good nickname, but she tells people, if I come back tomorrow and you're still a problem, then I'm going to either take you to jail, or she basically just says, this is the way it is, you can go get help or you can go to jail, and she follows up on it. I don't want to get in a debate back and forth. I can't even see you because it's completely bright up here. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards, but I'm talking to a voice in the corner, and I don't want to take up everybody's time debating back and forth. But
no problem. Like I said, I just wanted to know if there was something as business owners that we could step forth and go, okay, we can do this as a group of business owners to say, here, this is how we can help, here's how we cannot help, and go from there.
And that's why we put the downtown officer just specifically to address some of the downtown needs, and that's why we stood up Beat Health. We went from 0 officers in Beat Health to 12. We went from 0 officers to 2 in the HEART team, which is Homeless Engagement and Outreach team. But those have only been up for about 6 months. And so, again, you don't see a turn overnight. It's like turning a large ship. It turns slowly. It's not a speedboat. So I'm happy to talk to you offline. I can make you out, so if you kind of stay over there, I'll come and see you afterwards.
And we can also list the contact information, if you'd like, to our panel members on our Facebook page so that you can contact. And I'm so sorry, we have to wrap up. I'm sorry, what was that? Okay, sorry, one guy. Thank you, Kristi. Okay.
Test. Test. Yes, thank you very much. My name is Frank Flame. I have a question for the panel about building low-cost housing. To what extent do you see permitting processes and building regulations by the city, by the county, and by the state of California as barriers to building low-cost housing? Thank you.
Well, there are a lot of barriers to building low-cost housing that will really work. There's size of rooms that are, actually this is all being looked at now to provide, Modesto Junior College is going to start building tiny homes for our community.
That's awesome.
It's at the Volt Institute that used to be the Modesto B. We're going to try that. We're going to see how that would work out, where we put 1 to 15 of them in one spot and figure out how to do that with programming and all of that goes with it. The affordable housing thing has been discussed. It's just really hard because because there's such a demand on market rate housing, there's just not anything happening at that level. So we're going to have to get creative about that. And a lot of the ways we're dealing with, for instance, the low barrier shelters by potentially declaring an emergency, that helps to alleviate that. But that's not the long-term solution. The long-term solution is to provide some changes in the law so that the affordable housing can be there for much smaller units that are maybe clustered together.
Recently, community block grant funding, it's another meeting that I go to. We are sending to council a pilot project for a tiny home in a specific neighborhood, and we've heard that property adjacent to this is for sale, and I've talked to some people and trying to get them interested in buying the property so we could maybe do some tiny homes. But I know that eventually the entire neighborhood will probably come out and complain about their comps going down and this and that and la la la. So I'm just going to do my best and see if it happens. But, I mean, we can't not try.
Great. Thank you. We will have to wrap up now, and I kind of want to end on our third objective of the project, which is to inform the community on how they can help. So if in closing, each panel member can either do a call to action or some information to leave the audience with, that would be wonderful.
Sure. We, at Family Promise, we have been bringing the community together around the issue of child and family homelessness for many, many years. Our program, if you may not know, is a nationwide program with over 200 affiliates across the country. But what we want to do is ask everybody to do something. And there's something that everybody in our community can do. We have a lot of people who volunteer at Family Promise. That could be as simple as making beds for the families when they arrive at your congregation this week. It could be making a meal. It could be volunteering to drive our van a couple of times a week. So lots of ways for people to get involved. So you can volunteer. You can, the faith-based community does this for us already, but everybody can say a prayer or support us in those kinds of ways, think good thoughts, but give. That's the other thing that people can do. You can give, and there are plenty of nonprofit organizations in this community. Much of the government funding that comes in for the Emergency Solutions Grant Program requires that the nonprofits match that dollar for dollar. And so when you give to programs that are working hard to make a difference in our community, then we can leverage that funding to bring in additional dollars to help families in need.
I say what you can do is keep the pressure on, because that's what, it's such a complex problem and nobody wants it to happen in their backyard, right? And so what we have to do is we have to tell government, the people that are making the decisions, like on August 21st, this low barrier shelter, there's going to be a neighborhood that's really upset because it's going to be near them. But collectively, if we don't start doing some of these things, and like even Kristi's talking about the neighborhood around the housing that she's talking about, well, look at what's happening to our downtown in McHenry. you know, 5 years ago it wasn't like that here, and whatever happened, happened. I don't know how to reverse that. But I tell you, we just have to you need to support people who are trying to do something. And from my perspective, I got this way because I live right next to Grace-Ada Park, and I was getting madder and madder and madder about what was happening there. And I decided, you know, I'm supposed to love people, and I was getting to where I was hating what was happening in my neighborhood. So what I did is I just shifted my focus and said, I'm going to try and help solve the problem rather than being a part of the problem. And I don't expect all my neighbors to feel that way. They're frustrated, and a lot of business owners are frustrated. But just support people trying to do something. One of the biggest objections to the low barrier shelter is if we do a good job, more people will come. And you know what? I want to try something, even if it's a failure, because doing nothing is not acceptable anymore to our community, I think.
That's true. We need to allow your leaders to fail and be okay with that. Because they're so freaking freaked out about failing that they're scared to death. So another thing that we need, because I swear to you, I am a regular person, and this is just mind-blowing to say the least. We need encouragement. Thank you. I'll be at some council meeting at 9 o'clock at night making some freaking $1 million decision. Not one resident is there. But the next day in the newspaper, they're just blowing us up. People are making comments. We're getting letters. Nobody shows up. No one cares. So start caring just a little bit. You don't have to come to the whole meeting, but just show up and pray. For the love of God, pray.
So I agree with the pressure thing. I will also say this. I think Dean's been raising his hand and jumping up and down over in the corner over there. For those of you that really do want to help and you feel bad, and we all feel bad and you want to help, I think Dean does it right that he actually brings services out, not just comes out and throws food out of the back of his car or throws clothing out of the back of a van. And I think we really need to look at that as a city and as a lot of these groups that are wanting to help is, are we truly helping someone stand up, or are we just pushing them down on the ground and keeping them there? And sometimes that's, as bad as that sounds, when you're just going and throwing food out the back of your car and you're not bringing other people to say, can I help you get your driver's license? Can I help you, figure out how we can work with the DMV to pay off whatever class that someone needs so they can get their driver's license so they can get a job? It's not helping. And so that would be my desire, is keep the pressure on, but also, when your places of worship and some of the other things where people really truly want to help, realize maybe there's some models that we all need to follow, and that will help even more.
I want to know if you would be willing to work at our funeral home. And if you are, I would like you to come fill out an application.
I am willing, and yes, I would like to fill out. Thank you. Thank you.
You have to wear a suit, so I'll buy you a suit.
That's fine. Okay. I'm used to wearing suits. Okay. There's a group of us out there, homeless, that when we look at things being done, we wonder why it's not being followed through on or completed or finished. And you've already said it, don't be afraid to fail. To me, I'm going to put it in very simple terms. I came home crying from school one day. Mom asked me why. The other kids were laughing at me because I colored outside the lines. She said it was okay. You can color outside the lines. It's fine. I'd like to see people not be afraid to fail.
Thank you so much. So, David, your retirement plans are on hold, maybe. Thank you, each and every one of you, for taking the time out to come and meet with the community and be a part of this panel. Thank you guys for being patient and coming out. Thank you to the Modesto Peace Life Center for sponsoring the event. Thank you to Richard Anderson, Frank Ploof, Eric Caine, Joseph Homer. Thank you. Good night.